Laura rushed home, her mind whirling with plans to defend her compost bin. As she pulled into the driveway, she spotted her neighbor, Sarah, tending to her flower garden. "Sarah, I need your help," Laura called out, jogging over. Sarah looked up, wiping the sweat from her brow. "What's wrong, Laura? I heard you had a run-in with the HOA. They're trying to force me to remove my compost bin," Laura said, her eyes blazing with determination. "But I'm not going down without a fight. I need to rally the neighborhood to support me." Sarah's eyebrows rose in surprise. The compost bin, but the state just recognized it as a model for sustainable living. "I know," Laura exclaimed. "That's why I have to do something. This is about more than just my bin. It's about the future of our community." Sarah nodded slowly. "I see. Well, you can count me in. I'll do whatever I can to help." "Thank you, Sarah," Laura said, relief washing over her. "I'll need to get the word out and gather as much support as possible. This is going to be a tough battle, but I'm determined to win." Sarah placed a reassuring hand on Laura's arm. "I admire your passion, Laura. If anyone can take on the HOA, it's you." Laura smiled gratefully. "I just hope the rest of the neighborhood will be as willing to stand up for what's right." As she turned to head back home, Laura's gaze landed on her carefully tended compost bin. It stood as a symbol of her commitment to the environment, a testament to the power of individual action. She knew that with the community's support, she could make a real difference, not just for her own home, but for the entire neighborhood. Resolve hardening in her chest, Laura headed inside, already drafting the first of many impassioned pleas to her neighbors. This was a fight she refused to lose. Laura rushed home, her mind whirling with plans to defend her compost bin. As she pulled into the driveway, she spotted her neighbor, Sarah, tending to her flower garden. "Sarah, I need your help," Laura called out, jogging over. Sarah looked up, wiping the sweat from her brow. "What's wrong, Laura? I heard you had a run-in with the HOA. They're trying to force me to remove my compost bin," Laura said, her eyes blazing with determination. "But I'm not going down without a fight. I need to rally the neighborhood to support me." Sarah's eyebrows rose in surprise. The compost bin, but the state just recognized it as a model for sustainable living. "I know," Laura exclaimed. "That's why I have to do something. This is about more than just my bin. It's about the future of our community." Sarah nodded slowly. "I see. Well, you can count me in. I'll do whatever I can to help." "Thank you, Sarah," Laura said, relief washing over her. "I'll need to get the word out and gather as much support as possible. This is going to be a tough battle, but I'm determined to win." Sarah placed a reassuring hand on Laura's arm. "I admire your passion, Laura. If anyone can take on the HOA, it's you." Laura smiled gratefully. "I just hope the rest of the neighborhood will be as willing to stand up for what's right." As she turned to head back home, Laura's gaze landed on her carefully tended compost bin. It stood as a symbol of her commitment to the environment, a testament to the power of individual action. She knew that with the community's support, she could make a real difference, not just for her own home, but for the entire neighborhood. Resolve hardening in her chest, Laura headed inside, already drafting the first of many impassioned pleas to her neighbors. This was a fight she refused to lose. Over the next few days, Laura worked tirelessly to rally her neighbors. She drafted a petition highlighting the benefits of her compost bin and the state's recognition of it as a model for sustainable living. Neighbor by neighbor, she went door to door, sharing her story and asking for support. To her delight, many of her fellow residents were eager to lend their voices. They too were tired of the HOA's heavy-handed tactics and restrictive rules. Laura's passion and determination were infectious, and soon the petition was filling up with signatures. "This is incredible," Laura said, beaming as she reviewed the growing list of names. "I knew I couldn't be the only one who feels this way." Sarah placed a hand on Laura's shoulder. I'm so proud of you, Laura. You're really making a difference here. Thanks, Sarah, Laura replied. But the fight's not over yet. I still have to convince the HOA to back down. Well, you have an army of supporters behind you now, Sarah said, gesturing to the petition. I have a feeling they won't be able to ignore this. Laura nodded, a steely resolve in her eyes. We're going to show them that this community won't be bullied into compliance. It's time for a change. With renewed vigor, Laura set out to deliver the petition to the HOA's doorstep. As she approached the pristine clubhouse, she could feel the weight of the pages in her hands, a tangible symbol of the growing resistance. The HOA president, Margaret, greeted her with a tight-lipped smile. So, you've been stirring up trouble, I see. This isn't trouble, Margaret, Laura said, thrusting the petition forward. This is the voice of our community, and they're demanding that you respect my compost bin. Margaret's eyes narrowed as she scanned the signatures. We'll see about that, she said, her tone dripping with disdain. Laura stood her ground, unwavering in the face of Margaret's condescension. You can't ignore this, Margaret. The people have spoken, and they're not going to let you trample on their rights. For a moment, Margaret seemed taken aback by Laura's resolute stance. But then, a glint of defiance flashed in her eyes. We'll see about that, she repeated, turning on her heel and disappearing back into the clubhouse. Laura watched her go, her heart pounding with a mixture of triumph and trepidation. She knew this was only the beginning of a long and arduous battle, but she was more determined than ever to protect her compost bin and the principles it represented. In the days that followed, the tension in the neighborhood palpably escalated. Laura's petition had put the HOA on notice, and they were clearly determined to stand their ground. They're not going to back down easily, Laura told Sarah over coffee. Margaret is digging in her heels, and I have a feeling she's got the rest of the board wrapped around her finger. Sarah nodded solemnly. I've heard the rumors about her strong-arming tactics. It's no wonder so many people are afraid to challenge her. Well, I'm not going to let her bully me, Laura said, her eyes narrowing with determination. This is about more than just my compost bin. It's about the future of our community. I know, Sarah replied, placing a reassuring hand on Laura's arm. And you have a lot of support behind you. But the HOA is powerful, and they're not going to make this easy. Laura sighed heavily. I know. That's why I'm going to have to pull out all the stops. I need to find a way to put real pressure on them. Sarah's brow furrowed. What do you have in mind? I'm going to reach out to the local media, Laura said, a determined glint in her eye. This issue is bigger than just our neighborhood. If I can get the story out there, it might force the HOA's hand. That's risky, Sarah cautioned. Margaret and the rest of the board aren't going to take kindly to that kind of public scrutiny. I don't care, Laura replied, her jaw set. I'm done playing by their rules. If they want a fight, they're going to get one. With that, Laura stood up, her mind racing with ideas. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she was more determined than ever to protect her compost bin and the principles it represented. As she walked back to her house, Laura couldn't help but glance at the bin, standing tall and proud in her backyard. It was a symbol of her commitment to the environment, a tangible representation of the changes she wanted to see in her community. I won't let them take this away from me, she murmured, her resolve hardening. Not without a fight. Little did she know, the battle was about to intensify in ways she could never have imagined. True to her word, Laura wasted no time reaching out to the local media. She crafted a compelling press release, highlighting the benefits of her compost bin, the state's recognition of it as a model for sustainable living, and the HOA's heavy-handed attempts to have it removed. Within a week, the story had been picked up by several local news outlets, and Laura found herself fielding calls from reporters eager to cover the escalating battle. This is exactly what I needed, Laura said, beaming with satisfaction as she hung up the phone after another interview. Now the HOA can't ignore this. Sarah, who had been keeping a close eye on the situation, nodded approvingly. You're really making waves, Laura. I have a feeling the HOA is starting to feel the heat. They'd better, Laura replied, her eyes narrowing. Because I'm not backing down. This is about more than just my compost bin. It's about the future of our community. As the media coverage continued to build, the HOA began to feel the pressure. Margaret, the HOA president, found herself constantly fending off calls from reporters, all of whom were eager to get her side of the story. This is completely unacceptable, Margaret fumed, slamming her fist on the table during an emergency board meeting. We can't allow this kind of public scrutiny. It's undermining our authority. One of the other board members, a meek-looking man named Henry, cleared his throat nervously. But, maybe we should consider a compromise. I mean, if the state has recognized the compost bin as a model for sustainable living, maybe we could. Absolutely not. Margaret interrupted, glaring at Henry with undisguised contempt. We will not cave to this kind of public pressure. Our rules are in place for a reason, and we're going to enforce them, no matter what. The other board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly uneasy with Margaret's hardline stance. But none of them dared to speak up, cowed by her forceful personality and unwavering determination. As the meeting adjourned, Margaret turned to her closest allies on the board, a determined glint in her eye. We're going to have to get creative, she murmured. This woman isn't going to back down, and we can't afford the negative publicity. It's time to up the ante. With that, the group began to plot their next move, unaware that Laura was watching their every step, her own resolve hardening with every passing day. As the media spotlight continued to shine on the compost bin battle, Laura's neighbors began to rally around her in even greater numbers. Word had spread quickly about the HOA's heavy-handed tactics, and many residents were growing increasingly fed up with the organization's restrictive rules and lack of community input. It's about time someone stood up to them, said one neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Mrs. Wilkins. For years, they've been pushing us around, telling us how to live our lives. This is our community, not theirs. Laura nodded emphatically. Exactly. And that's why I'm not going to back down. This is about more than just my compost bin. It's about the future of our neighborhood. Mrs. Wilkins patted Laura's hand reassuringly. You've got our full support, dear. We're all behind you on this one. Buoyed by the growing community of supporters, Laura began to strategize her next moves. She knew that the HOA was likely plotting something in retaliation, and she needed to be prepared. They're not going to give up easily, she told Sarah over coffee one morning. I have a feeling they're going to try something underhanded. Sarah frowned, her brow furrowing with concern. What do you think they might do? Laura shook her head grimly. I'm not sure, but I need to be one step ahead of them. I can't afford to let my guard down for a second. As if on cue, a sudden commotion erupted outside Laura's home. Rushing to the window, she and Sarah were met with the sight of a large truck pulling up to the curb, its logo emblazoned with the HOA's insignia. What on earth? Laura murmured, her heart racing with a mixture of trepidation and anger. Moments later, a group of burly men in HOA uniforms began to descend from the truck, carrying what appeared to be large trash bags. They're not. Sarah breathed, her eyes widening with horror. Laura didn't even wait for her friend to finish the thought. Grabbing her keys, she rushed outside, determined to confront the intruders head-on. What do you think you're doing? She shouted, striding towards the men with a fierce determination. The HOA representatives paused, exchanging uneasy glances. We've been instructed to remove your compost bin, one of them said, his voice gruff. It's a violation of our regulations. Laura's eyes narrowed dangerously. Over my dead body, she growled. You're not touching my compost bin. The standoff had begun, and Laura knew that the stakes had never been higher. The air hung thick with tension as Laura stood her ground, staring down the HOA representatives who had arrived to remove her prized compost bin. Around them, a small crowd of supportive neighbors began to gather, their expressions a mix of outrage and determination. "You can't do this," Laura said, her voice firm and unwavering. "That compost bin is a state-recognized model for sustainable living. You have no right to take it away." The lead HOA representative, a burly man named Mr. Davis, narrowed his eyes. "The HOA has made its decision, ma'am. This bin is a nuisance, and it has to go." "Nuisance?" Laura scoffed. "It's a symbol of our community's commitment to the environment. You're the ones who are a nuisance, with your outdated rules and your heavy-handed tactics." Mr. Davis' jaw tightened, and he took a step closer to Laura. "Look, lady, we're just following orders. If you don't move that thing willingly, we'll have to take it by force." Laura refused to be intimidated. "You're not taking my compost bin, and that's final. If you try, you'll have to go through me and my neighbors first." At that, the gathered onlookers erupted into a chorus of cheers and affirmations, their solidarity emboldening Laura even further. Sensing the growing resistance, Mr. Davis hesitated, exchanging a glance with his crew. "This isn't over," he growled, before reluctantly signaling his men to retreat. As the HOA truck rumbled away, Laura felt a surge of triumph. "We did it," she exclaimed, turning to the cheering crowd. "We showed them that we won't back down." The neighbors erupted into applause, congratulating Laura on her unwavering stand. Even Sarah, who had been watching the confrontation unfold from the sidelines, rushed over to embrace her friend. "I knew you could do it," Sarah said, her eyes shining with pride. Laura smiled, her heart swelling with a sense of purpose. "This is just the beginning," she declared. "We're going to keep fighting until the HOA recognizes that our community is more than just a set of rules. It's a living, breathing organism that thrives on diversity and sustainability." The crowd erupted into renewed cheers, their spirits buoyed by Laura's words. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over. As the sun set on the neighborhood, Laura knew that the path ahead would be long and arduous, but she was more determined than ever to see it through. In the aftermath of the confrontation with the HOA, Laura's compost bin remained firmly in place, a symbol of her community's defiance and resilience. The news coverage had sparked a groundswell of support, and the HOA was forced to back down, at least for the time being. However, Laura knew that the battle was far from over. Margaret and her cronies on the HOA board were not the type to simply concede defeat, and she could sense their simmering resentment every time she crossed paths with them around the neighborhood. "They're going to try something else," Laura confided to Sarah one evening as they sipped coffee on her back porch, overlooking the now iconic compost bin. "I can feel it." Sarah nodded, her brow furrowed with concern. "I don't doubt it. Margaret is a force to be reckoned with, and she's not going to let this go easily." Laura sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I just wish I knew what they were planning. We need to stay one step ahead of them, or they'll find a way to undermine everything we fought for." As if on cue, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb, and Margaret herself stepped out, her expression unreadable. Laura tensed, watching as the HOA president strode purposefully towards her home. "Laura," Margaret said, her voice dripping with false civility. "I was hoping we could have a word." Laura exchanged a wary glance with Sarah before turning to face her unwelcome guest. "What do you want, Margaret?" "I think we've had enough of this public spectacle," Margaret said, her lips curling into a thin smile. "It's time we came to a reasonable solution." Laura's eyes narrowed. "A reasonable solution? You mean you want me to get rid of my compost bin?" Now let's not be hasty," Margaret said, raising a placating hand. "I'm simply suggesting that we find a compromise. Perhaps we could relocate the bin to a less conspicuous location. Laura scoffed. You mean, hide it away where no one can see it? Absolutely not. This bin is a point of pride for our community, and I'm not going to let you bury it out of sight. Margaret's expression darkened, and Laura could see the anger simmering behind her eyes. Fine then. Have it your way. But don't say I didn't try to be reasonable. With that, Margaret turned on her heel and stalked back to her SUV, the tires squealing as she peeled away. Laura watched her go, a sense of dread settling in the pit of her stomach. She's up to something, Sarah. I can feel it. Then we'll be ready, Sarah replied, her voice steady and resolute. We've come this far, and we're not going to let them win now. As the sun set over the neighborhood, Laura gazed at her compost bin, a silent sentinel in her backyard. She knew that the fight was far from over, but she was more determined than ever to protect it and everything it represented. This was a battle for the very soul of her community, and she was prepared to do whatever it took to emerge victorious.